Welcome to the video series for Sir Heroscape's Champions Circle League Qualifier number 3 for 2025. This is an online tournament that is part of a league that is run by Sir Heroscape, which has 4 qualifiers each year, and then that feeds into a big tournament of 16 qualifiers who've made it at the end of the year for an end-of-year championship event. Let's take a look at the format for this event. So this is 480 points standard pricing, so that's not Delta. 20 figures, and we are looking at contemporary only. So just the units that Renegade Games has produced, and this is also going to allow the pre-release units. So those are the units that have been unveiled but will not be available until October 6th. Those upcoming units are going to make this quite a different meta than what we saw at Gen Con 2025, as those are the only new units that we'll have seen since then, but there are several pretty good common squad figures that are going to warp the meta pretty significantly from the uniques heavy meta plus Tanukis that we saw going on at Gen Con 2025. Alright, let's hop into the army builder and take a look at some of the viable armies. So to get this started, I'm going to go ahead and invert this points high to low so that we can look at the more expensive heroes first and either consider or eliminate them. Zenithrax is not there. Zenithrax is terrible. Theraxis Dragoon is solid, but better in all time than in contemporary because there's no Nagribs to bond with in this meta here. Scavarith is definitely legit. Scavarith and the Ice Necks are an army that absolutely should be considered in this meta, so let's take a look at what that would look like here. So for the Ice Necks, we're going to want Scav and Lich and the Wraith Riders, and that leaves us with 55 points left over, which I think is going to end up just being filled out by the Revenant Acolytes. You could do the Oathbound Legionnaires instead, just as a 50-point filler, but given that you already have 2 heroes, I think you would just want to go with the Revenant Acolytes to finish that build out. So let's hold this idea as option number 1 and then keep looking. Next up, we have Admiral EJ. I don't think pirates are there. Too expensive, more commons now than before, so that's going to be a lot worse for pirates to deal with. Just don't think it's really worth considering. Solon's cool, but just too expensive for sort of a standalone hero. Similar deal with Q11. Q11 is going to be more viable than Solon because he has the ability to kill 3 things in one turn and hit pretty hard, but I still think you're paying a lot there when you could be getting something else. The something else being Maladrix. Maladrix is really good, y'all. If you watched any of my videos from Gen Con, you know that Maladrix had quite the showing. Probably a little bit weaker here now that some of the commons are going to be more spammable, but still quite good and very relevant in the meta. I'm going to actually come back to Maladrix later as part of a different army that is where I think she best fits in, but just keep Maladrix on the back burner for now and know that we're going to come back to that. Crimson Widow, I'm sure you can make some good pirate armies here, but I don't think they're going to be able to stand up to the common squad spam that we're going to see. And the heroes in particular are going to be quite vulnerable to the Great Bow Archers, which we'll get to in a minute. So something to keep in mind. Iron Lich, we already talked about as part of the Icenic build. Adelburn is solid. Adelburn is very good. It's once you add Adelburn and Frostclaws, what do you have left over? So you add Adelburn and Frostclaws, and you have 210 points left over, which is a little bit awkward. You don't have enough for Maladrix. Because if you add Maladrix, you can't quite add the FHG here. They're not going to quite fit. I imagine that was intentional, because that's a pretty good build if you could run both combos of the Uniques core. For 210 points, you could run some Great Bows, but you're only going to be able to fit 2 of them again, and then have these 50 points left over. So you probably end up going Oathbound at that point, but it's still not, the most efficient thing out there. It's just a little bit hard to fill out Adelburn and the Frostclaws here with something good. You can add some Gelry, for sure. So you can add some of the Gelry Vanguard, but then at this point in time, it's like, I probably just want more Gelry, because 3 is not really enough, so that's not great either. Basically, Adelburn's great, but in contemporary only at a point total like this, it's just kind of difficult to fill him out. If this was 10 points higher, the Adelburn-Maladrix combo would be quite legitimate, but not quite there in terms of the point total. So I'm going to go ahead and pass on Adelburn and the Frostclaws for this event. Moving back down, Air Marshal Zed Nesbitt. That's funny. Sergeant Drake Alexander. Another good hero, good solid hero, but you're not really building an army core around him because he's going to be a standalone hero. Imperator Kane, not there. Definitely not there yet. Especially with all the large figures that we're going to see. For example, if you look at Stomp, it only works on small and medium figures. And Great Bows, notably, are large. So that's going to be a real problem for him. Bok Bernard, we've got another pirate hero. Next up is Halushot. Halushot is definitely legitimate. That being said, I think Halushot is also going to be a little bit better in all time, where you have access to some of the large beasts. For example, the Ice Trolls. Halushot's going to be really good with Ice Trolls because you can do double Ice Troll bonding with Halushot, which is a lot of attacks and healing going on all at once. But we don't have access to those here, so I think that the Dryans are going to be a little bit weaker as a result of that. Already covered Frostclaws, Halusha. Solid, but again, not really a core piece, I think. If you're running a pure Dryans build, I think you have too many Dryans. And maybe an add-on to another piece. We'll see what the point totals look like for the common squads once we fill out some of those. Iwashia, solid, but unspectacular. Knight Irene, I see no real reason to take her in Contemporary when you could take Adelburn. I mean, I guess if you don't have the points for Adelburn, but at that point, you probably shouldn't be running the build you're running. Marishot, another Dryan. Ordo Borealis, definitely legit, but hurt a little bit by the lack of Concan in Contemporary. Queen Kyrion, not legit. Don't bother. Shori, same, don't bother. Raylan 4.0, solid. I definitely could see some armies that maybe want to add her into it as a last piece. So we'll keep her in mind as a final piece if we have 105 points left over and consider if she's the right thing to fill that out with. Dorum, not there in Contemporary. No Axe Grinders to bond with. Sad. Mielke, not there. Rackshot, really not there. AoE Raylan, a very good figure. Hurt a little bit in Contemporary as well by the lack of Death Knight bonding. Again, could use her as a final filler piece if we end up wanting that. 100 points left over if we have commons that want that. Kilkrax, not legit. Garushia, not one of the best Dryans. Probably not going to get run much in an actual Bring One format. Glenerva, quite good. Glenerva is an interesting tech piece here to counter the Great Bow Archers. We are going to keep Glenerva in mind for later as a potential filler piece for something like the Gelry, who really need to prevent getting blasted by Great Bows from range. Already covered the Necrotechs. Krakenling, we are going to come back to when we get down to the Gelry in a minute. Cornelius, another pirate hero, not there. Dreadnoughts. Dreadnoughts are definitely legit. I think that they're going to struggle quite in this meta, though. I still don't think pirates are cheap enough to really be run here. Thea, another hero. Great Bow Archers. Now we get into the core of some really good stuff. So, Great Bow Archers are one of the newer units. They're one of the pre-release units. They are going to be quite solid. The major thing with Great Bow Archers is that they can up their attack at higher range. So this power Longshot Specialists, if they're shooting at a full 7 range away, they get +2 to the attack. That is a lot. That's attacks of 5 now that they're throwing at that range. And if they're on height, it's an attack of 6. So they have a lot of potential to kill heroes if you can set them up to be sort of exactly 5 spaces away. But they still have some of the additional benefit. If they're 4 or more away, they still get +1 to the attack. So you're still going to get attacks of 4 off a lot into things. Keep in mind, this is only if they don't move, so you can't back up to be exactly 7 away and then shoot. That'd be pretty strong because you'd always get to pull it off. So you have to do a little bit of planning with Great Bows, but they're very solid. I think there's really 2 Great Bow armies that are relevant in this meta. The first is just spamming Great Bows. So Great Bows X6, because that's how many you can fit. Pretty simple, pretty good. It's a lot of Great Bows. The way that you would generally play this build is that you would sort of stagger them out to where you have lines of Great Bows sort of feeding out of the back of your start zone, to where as they come towards it, their units are going to be within 7 range of your Great Bows most of the time. Because once they get closer than 7 to the first Great Bow, then they're 7 from the one behind him or 7 from the one behind him, etc. So you're just trying to create sort of this field where you have a lot of spaces covered by 7 range Great Bows that are then dangerous for your opponent to move into. Great Bows X6 is definitely legit, and we're going to hold that thought for a minute. Right. So the other way to play Great Bows is to tech them as a 2 or 3x common with something that goes with them. In this case, I think the best way to fill that out is going to be Maladrix. So if we do 3 Great Bows, we then have 240 points left over, which is going to be exactly Maladrix. This is Well, not exactly. You have 20 points left over, but you can't use those 20 points for anything in Contemporary. This army, I think, is going to be really, really strong as well. And we're going to hold on to that thought while we continue looking through the meta. Right, next up is Killian Vane. Another pirate hero. Leviatech, good, but again, weaker in Contemporary, missing some of the bonding options that you have in all-time. Oathbound Phalanx and Oathbound Legionnaires, we'll just go ahead and consider them together here. A very solid piece if you have 130 points left over and need a filler unit that they can provide, but they're not something you're going to be building around as core, so we're not really going to consider them unless we end up with an army that's got about 130 or 140 points left over. Ziamara, not there in Contemporary. Exiles, very solid if you have 75 points left over. Again, something to keep in mind as a potential filler unit to end a build with. Scions of Icaria. So Scions have some interesting abilities where they can bond with a lot of stuff. So they can bond with a dragon or a queen, essentially. Or a king, or some other stuff too. But these are the main things that they can bond with. So Maledrix is a big one. So you can do like Maledrix with Festering Honor Guard and several Scions. That's a very legitimate build. The 110 points or the 35 points left over, though, are both pretty awkward. It's really tough to fill those out. You can fill them out with a Raylan, for example. So you could do 2 Scions, Maledrix, Festering Honor Guard, and Raylan 4.0. That's a viable option. I don't think this is quite up to the level of the other stuff, though. Into the Icenex, they're able to kill Maledrix fairly efficiently. Into the Great Bows, they're also able to deal with Maledrix fairly efficiently. And then you're left over with just a lot of Scions and Festering. The problem is if Maledrix dies quickly or first, you have a lot of stuff that's now not very good without her around. So I don't think Scions are quite there. Decker, not there in Cheese. Gallery Vanguards. Now we get into some other fun new stuff. These guys are going to be pretty good. These are a 4-person melee squad that has a couple of really interesting powers that give them cool abilities. I think the most important thing is Tidal Advance. So if you're familiar with Death Chasers from Classic Heroscape, this is somewhat similar in that you get to move your figures around before rounds, except it's not just before round 1, it's before every round. Now it's 1 space for each order marker on the Gallery Vanguards, so you're going to have 3 or 4 order markers on them most of the time, so you're going to be able to move them 3 or 4 spaces each. So if you spam these guys, you're moving all of them 3 or 4 spaces. That's quite good. It also lets you move up any unfathomable. It also lets you move up any It also lets you move up any unfathomable things, which is the Krakenling as well. So Krakenling is quite cool in that Krakenling is kind of like a little mini Hydra, where for each life it's got, it gets to attack 1 additional time, 4 attack, 5 defense, solid figure. 4 move is pretty limiting, but it gets to move based on the gallery's movements, so you can really, you don't have to take any turn order markers on it until you're ready for it to strike. So let's take a look at how these fill out with the point total here. So gallery are quite solid. So you're going to want 4 of them because they're a melee squad and you get to move more, so you're just going to want to max out on them. 5 is going to be too many, you're going to be over on figures. Once you do 4 Gallery and a Krakenling, you have 135 points left over. So you have a couple options. You could take another Krakenling, which leaves you with 50 points. The problem with that is the best 50-point filler is a 4-person squad, the Oathbound Legionnaires, and you can't fit them at this point in time, so that's a little bit unfortunate. I don't think you necessarily want that second Krakenling then. So what can you do instead of the Krakenling for 135 points? One option is AoE Drake. This is a cool option that techs fairly well into the Great Bow specifically, because they're not going to be able to attack him from range because of Thorian speed, which means that they have to get next to him, and then it's just attacks of 3. And he's going to be killing 1 per turn. So that's a pretty solid piece to add in there. What other options do we have here? Non-bonding Frostclaw is not really an option. We could do some of the Raylans, but then we're sort of weaker. So I think that Drake is probably going to be it here, where you add Drake in as a filler piece that can either go mash up into a big thing or deal with Great Bows in a late game situation. So this is a pretty solid army. Let's hold this thought and see if there's anything else. All right, after Gallery, we have the Knaves, more Pirates. Again, I don't think they're quite there. Glide Strikers are not good. Festering Honor Guard, we've already covered with Mal. Tuck Harrigan, not there. Mizairix, not there. Talked about Oathbound a lot already. Onshu, I mean, you're going to take her if you're running, Dryads, but Lava Crabs. Lava Crabs could be all right. Let's take a look at it. Let's consider it. Consider our options. So if you spam a bunch of Lava Crabs, this is one spot where you probably are going to want to have Glenerva. So you can go ahead and tack Glenerva on here to help you a little bit, and then you're left with sort of one figure and 120 or four figures and 165. I can see arguments a lot of ways here. One option would be to throw Q11 in here with 5 squads of Molten Crustaceans. It's solid. If you take him out and put another squad of Lava Crabs back in there, you're left with 120 points again, which there's not a ton of amazing options that you can do for just one figure left over. The short version is I just don't think they're very good. I think now that Gelry are out, they're going to get outclassed by Gelry in the melee department and just not be super relevant anymore, which I'm not exactly sad about. Moving on, Tanuki. Tanuki were pretty good at Gen Con, but Tanuki are also going to be highly outclassed now that Gelry are able to get 4 attacks per turn off to their 2 attacks. They're just not going to be relevant anymore. We got some of the beasts now that Dryads can bond with. So Rono is one of the new ones. In the beast department, we also have Chana down here and Kita. You're going to include them if you have Dryads, but not otherwise. Grave Grim has some cool abilities to move some things around the map. I don't think it's really there yet. My understanding is there's probably going to be more things that Grave Grim can move in the future, but they're not out yet. Revenant Acolytes can be useful, like an Ice Neck build if you have something where they fit with, but otherwise, And Deflectocron is weird. I don't know what to think yet about him, to be honest. Probably not relevant for this meta, but I'm not sure where this will lead to. Anyhow, that really leaves us with 4 armies to consider at the top level of this meta, in my opinion. We have the Icenix with Revenant Acolytes. We have all the Great Bow Archers, 6 of them. We have half of that, 3 Great Bow Archers with Maledrix and Festering Honor Guard. And then the Gelry Vanguards, whether that's 4 with Krakenling and Drake, or maybe 4 with Krakenling and Glenerva and something else. There's a few options there to fill it out with. Now that we've sort of narrowed the meta down to 4 armies, how do those 4 armies do against each other? Scavareth is worse in a meta that is this heavily dominated by squad figures. For example, Scavareth overkilling a single Great Bow? Great. You got one. Doesn't matter that much. Same with overkilling a Gelry Vanguard. Even the Maledrix build has a lot of Great Bow Archers that you can open with and try to put a lot of wounds on Lich or Scav in the opening there. So I don't think the Icenix are there anymore. I think that the common squads that have come out are going to outclass the Icenix and sort of drop them down. So let's go ahead and not consider that build anymore. That leaves us with the Gelry and then the 2 different variations of Great Bows. In terms of these 3 armies into each other, I think that the Gelry Vanguards are going to beat the pure Great Bows army, because once they get engaged, they're just out-activating them so heavily. 4 attacks per turn versus 2. It's quite significant, and they're going to be able to close that gap pretty well with the fact that you can move so many of them so quickly. I actually like the Festering Honor Guard Maledrix version of Great Bows better into Gelry specifically, because you can open with the Great Bows, and then once the Gelry come in, you can then switch to Maledrix and get a couple turns with 7 attack between Maledrix and the Festering Honor Guard going into the Gelry. In terms of the Great Bow semi-mirror between pure Great Bows and Great Bows Maledrix, I think that Maledrix is fairly useful, but that you have to open with her. I don't think you can afford to leave her sitting still in the start zone, because Great Bows have the chance to set themselves up 7 spaces away and then get hided shots for 6 on her, which is just terrible. So I think you have to open Maledrix in that matchup. But I don't think that's so bad. Maledrix will be on height most of the time. There'll be some situations where you can avoid Maledrix being exactly 7 away from any of them, and then she's getting attacked by 2 attacks of 4. If she has height, she'll have 6 defense against both of those. It's not so terrible. Another really nice thing there, though, is that if they do kill Maledrix first, you then have 5 FHGs that are all attacking Great Bows with 3v3s, and that's a lot of potential Great Bow kills. So in terms of the mirror there, you need to trade Maledrix and Festering Honor Guard for about 6 of the Great Bows to then set up for 6 Great Bow v 6 Great Bow endgame after that point in time, which honestly I think is reasonable. I think you can trade for around that amount. Maybe the pure Great Bows is a tiny, tiny favorite, but if so, it's close between those 2 in the semi-mirror there. So where does that leave us? I think that the pure Great Bows build is going to be a little bit of an underdog to the Gelry Vanguards build, and that the Gelry Vanguards is going to be a little bit of an underdog to the mixed Great Bow Maladrix army, but that the mixed Great Bow Maladrix army and the pure Great Bow army is going to be like reasonably close to a coin flip. So with all of those sort of different percentages into each other, I think that the best bet is to run the mixed 3 Great Bow plus Maladrix build, because I think it's the one that's not going to be a meaningful underdog to any of the others that are at the top of the meta. So that is what I'm going to go with. I'm going to run 3 Great Bows Archers with Maladrix and the Festering Honor Guard. Ready to play the event? And let's roll on into round 1.